Welcome back.
Let's be join.
Yeah, he's joined.
Others, please mute your microphones, please.
Vivek, you can continue. Vivek, you are joined, right?
No, he didn't join. He's joining. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Vivek, you can continue.
Vivek, you can continue.
Yeah, I'm just setting up my laptop again, and I will share my screen from the laptop. Okay, can you see the screen again?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, let's continue. So, bullwhip effect was what I was mentioning. This is the instance, or this is the concept, which means that the moment you have a disruption at your demand side, a much larger disruption is witnessed on the upstream, which is the supply side. Now, communication basically plays a real critical role to understand what is the current status of a certain material, whether it is produced, whether it is still rejected by the quality department, and how much commitment should we give to the market, etc. So there are lots of service providers who specialize just for the communication that is there in the supply chain domain per se, and they help to build or bridge this gaps between different domains of supply chain, and makes the lives of the supply chain professionals slightly easier as they are grappling with the other challenges. Okay. Now, how do we measure whether a supply chain is functioning properly? There are lots of criteria called as key performance indicators. So I've just chosen some of those very frequently. First is just like we measure the health of a person by his temperature, which is in a normal zone, or whether the pressure that is generated by the heart. So these are some of the basic measurements are handling the supply chain in a good way by understanding whether the forecast accuracy, which means what did you plan to sell and how much did you end up selling, right? So this is just a very simple definition of forecast accuracy. A good accuracy is something which is around or over 75% at a combination level of, if you're looking at a national level, and if you're looking at at the sales product level. So we call it a country product combination. Okay. Similarly, there are other criteria like whether your order fulfillment, and we measure it in terms of whether your orders are being fulfilled on time and in full. And if you are performing in the high 90s, then you are supposed to be doing a good job of managing your overall supply chain. Similarly, there are others, but I've just taken 4 of the most common that I've come across. Is how much is your inventory turnover? Okay? And inventory turnover is nothing but a ratio of annual sales to your average inventory across different operating months. So if you are doing some over 8%, 8 times or 10 times, basically it's a non-dimensional, just a normal number. So if the ratio is over 8 or over 10, then you are supposed to be doing good. So it basically means that you are turning over your inventory so many times in a given year. So more the turns that you do for your company in terms of in a proportion to the annual sales, the better off you are doing in terms of inventory. And then lastly, there is a concept called as cash to cash cycle time, which basically means for how many days is your money locked up when you start spending money towards the activities like purchasing of raw material and converting that raw material and then selling it and getting the money back. So how long is your money tied up in the industry? So if you are doing something like less than 35 days or 40 days even, then you are considered to be doing good in terms of managing in your cash cycle. Okay. And for different industries, there are multiple ways you can understand how good or bad your supply chain is. As I said, these are the some of the very common measurement factors how good your supply chain is. Okay. So what are the core strategies of management of supply chain? So you must have heard of these words or the acronyms called as make to stock, make to order, pull strategy, push strategy. So I'll just take maybe half a minute each explaining what kind of meaning is there for these strategies. So basically, make to stock is a strategy in which you anticipate that your sale is going to happen in certain pattern for a certain product category and in a given region. Based on that, what you do is you start planning for material in advance. You produce the finished products in advance, and you start stocking up. So stocking is the core over here. You end up anticipating the demand and stocking it up. It is very useful for products which are non-perishable, and their sales pattern is predictive, or let us say predictive to a higher degree. Predictive is not a good word, but predictive to a higher degree in terms of high 60s or 70 kind of prediction. Then you're saying to be good in terms of make to stock. Now, make to order is a strategy followed by companies, especially who are in the uh, product categories which are perishable, which are extremely high value, and it is not very easy to discard products if you are not going to sell those products. Okay, so the companies which are specific, especially in the pharmaceutical industry, they are very very sensitive in terms of the shelf life. If you are not able to sell, then in a given given sales pattern and a rate of sales, then producing them and stocking them does not make a lot of sense. If you're in an electronic industry where the product's total life cycle is itself short, if the product is going out of fashion very very quickly, like apparel industry, it makes more sense to go for make to order, because the predictability of what is going to sell is really really the degree of prediction is very very short. If you are under 50% or 40%, then you are not going to do a make to stock, you're probably going to make to order. Okay. Now, in the supply chain, when we talk of pull, that means whenever the stocks, or whenever your, let's say, retail stores, it is running out of stock, whenever it makes a sell, you basically understand or you sense what is selling in the market currently, and then you only replenish that specific product category or that specific selling product. So that is an example of a pull based supply chain system. When it is a push based, what you basically do is that you are driving whatever you are producing and forcing the other partners in the supply chain, be it your distributors or stockists or the retailers, to sell whatever you are producing. Okay, so that, and basically this kind of supply chain results in higher sales, but it is much more chaotic. Pull based supply chains are more efficient because they are only replenishing what the customer is actually consuming. Okay, but the other way is when the manufacturer thrusts his production down to the supply chain and his business partner and saying that you must sell what I am producing. Okay, so as I said, it results in higher sales numbers, it results in higher market share. However, it does not result in a very good supply chain numerics for you. Your supply chain is going to be pathetic in terms of the inventory that you're holding, or in terms of how much write-offs you're doing in terms of the overall lost sales. Some of the companies I have mentioned before, these are basically the hallmarks or the companies that we look up to in terms of how to efficiently or effectively manage your overall customer satisfaction and do it quickly, do it fast. There is these are some of the companies, except probably Cisco and Dell. I've worked with four others already as part of my consulting assignments or the product launches that I've made to these companies. And I've seen these companies very closely in terms of the way they handle extremely high product portfolio. Some of the companies, for an example, I'm not going to talk about Amazon. It's going to sell probably 40,000, 50,000 SKUs at any given point of time. But even the others like ITCs and Colgate Palmolive, their product portfolios are extremely diverse. They sell nothing less than 1,500 to 2,000 different types of products at any given point of time, and across different customer segments, across different types of geographies. And these companies have been the early adopters. Why I respect these companies? Because I've seen that these are early adopters in terms of bringing about innovation in terms of supply chain usage of different types of software, not just software that I am selling or that I am making, but making different new concepts and reaching out to the customer. Some of these companies, for an example, do not do forecasting only for themselves. They do the sales forecasting for their own customers. For an example, Colgate Palmolive and ITC, these are the companies who have invested for last 20-25 years that I'm seeing them. They actually figure out not what their own depots are selling, but they also figure out what their distributors are selling as well as their retailers are selling. So they have very, very rich database about their different types of customers at different layers, and they invested in maintaining their databases, deploying their people, deploying technology to get the stock numbers, to get the sales numbers on a weekly, fortnightly, and a monthly level, and using that data to make their own decisions on what should be their back-end supply chain planning. Same goes with Nestle. Nestle is also known to be very, very in the forefront in adopting technology in making these decisions. Sorry, was there a comment?
No.
All right. Okay. And Dell, we already know Dell is one of the pioneers in supply chain management with their famous and legendary half a day inventory across the globe. That is something that people still strive. People still have Dell's inventory levels as benchmark to have to reach. This is something that only people who are very, very tight control of their inventory as well as the vendor management. Lot of I think 95% of the parts that are assembled into Dell's products are done by their vendors. There is hardly any transformation or even the final fabrication, the final assembly also is something that Dell has completely outsourced to their vendors. So I'm coming to the close of the session, and as I had mentioned that I will highlight a specific industry after having spoken about the multiple aspects of supply chain management as a topic, and getting into slightly more detail on the pharmaceutical industry. So pharmaceutical industry is an industry which directly impact the products, directly impact lives. They make medicines, they make different types of equipments which are completely affecting human lives and animal lives. It is extremely highly regulated industry. The main reason obviously is because it affects human lives and animal lives, right? So there is very, very tight control on what kind of medicines you will sell, in what dosage form you will sell, what should be the strength of the medicine, how much should be the the total tenure of administering the dosages to the patient. So there is extremely high amount of documentation and approval process that is involved in this industry. Okay, so also there are different kind of rules which is called as pharmacology rules by different markets. So for an instance, US pharmacology rules are completely different or diverse the pharmacology or the standards that are required for Europe or for Japan or for Africa and so on. It is not as if you make a television or you make a biscuit and you can sell it in different geographies. No, the same paracetamol, the same Viagra and whatever medicine it is going to be there, it is sold under different specifications which are required by different markets. So that is why the diverse pharmacology. And because of these, the product structure becomes more and more diverse. You have to serve the same product for different markets by adhering to different specifications, right? And because this products cannot be advertised in most of the markets globally, the influencer is your doctor. You really do not know because of the extremely deep knowledge that is required to build this product. The consumer really does not know what is the kind of medicine. So entire decision making is on the advisor, which is the pharmacist, and the influencer, which is your doctor. Okay. So and there is the demand pattern is extremely seasonal. You can have your malaria related medicines selling only during the monsoon seasons, and other season the stock is just lying over there, right? So similarly, there are other products within the pharmaceutical industry which are extremely seasonal. And as I mentioned in my earlier slides, the pharmaceutical products are very, very sensitive to shelf life. And it is our common buyer behavior also. The moment we even want to buy simple thing like a paracetamol, we want to check what is the expiry date of this, whether this tablet is going to expire in next 3 months, 4 months, etc. So the entire supply chain is also affected by the fact that if your stocks are expiring soon, that means product are not going to be sold. So I've just given a glimpse of the characters. Now I'm going to give a slight insight on the product structure. Now there are several types of dosage forms. There are products which are taken orally, or those are called enterals, like tablets, capsules, and lozenges. So the same medicine can come in different shape and form. Same medicine can be given as an injection, or as a nebulizer, or an inhaler. So you're apart from your market structure, but because the doctor advises you to take the same medicine in a different form, then your product structure also becomes more and more diverse. Topical means the ones which are related to dermatology. There are powders, creams, ointments, gels, lotions. So I'm just on the top of this, I'm just trying to give a diversity of the products that are involved in the pharmaceutical industry. Now coming to the second layer of what goes into the major dosage form. So this dosage form is what we consume as patients. This is what we will consume. But what goes into the product? There are 2 or 3 major components. One is called the API, active pharmaceutical ingredient, which is the real chemical that affects our organs, our lungs, brains, hearts, etc., etc. And then there are other inactive ingredients which are like filler materials. Those could be binding agent, there could be lubricants, sugars, oils, colors, stabilizers. So these are not really the chemical ingredient which affects our body, but it just is used as a filler. Apart from that, there are several types of packing material. There are primary packing, like you have a blister pack, there is an aluminum foil, there are bottles and syringes, and so on. There are multiple things like, and then there is a concept of a mono pack, secondary pack, tertiary pack. Okay, and very commonly you will have printed literature in a specific language that goes along with your whatever drugs you are consuming. There could be a measuring cup also, that if it's a liquid, if there could be a measuring cup also inside it. So I just wanted to give an extent that the single tablet that we consume, or a single spoon of process that we consume, it involves so many things. Tablet or the single spoonful of protein is basically undergoing a cycle of transferring in form of a raw material. It is moved either from ships or tankers. From it could be a domestic purchase, or it could be local purchase. Finally, where it goes into what is called as API manufacturing, So API manufacturing is the first step in any pharma manufacturing. Could be several stages in which and comes to API manufacturing. Within API manufacturing, there are at least 6 to 10 different stages of converting the raw materials into what is called as the active pharmaceutical ingredients. It takes, and the whole process from the point of availability of all the raw materials to getting converted into an API, it takes minimum 10 to 15 days because of the different stages through which the whole raw materials are going through, and comes to a level when it is called as an API or an active pharmaceutical ingredient. Now, these factories are typically different from what is called as a final drug formulation factory, or DF. The FDF is the acronym used for that specific factory. That is where the API is processed, or it is clubbed along with different elements that I mentioned, like the excipients, like the stabilizers, like the colors, like the lubricants and oils and sugars, etc. It is converted into either a suspension, it is either converted into an injectable, or it is converted into a tablet that we consume once it reaches our retail pharmacy store. From the factory, it typically goes to a depot or a mother depot, and then it goes to a stockist or a distributor. That distributor sends it to a pharmacy, and that is where we collect our medicines from. Okay, so the whole process from the time it leaves the raw material factory, the source, and the time it reaches for our own consumption, there is a minimum period of 3 to 6 months for the entire processes to happen. There is a big team of people who manage the entire flow of process of transportation, of storage, of doing quality control at different stages, and then finally roll out the finished product, which is then transferred from the depots to the distributors till it reaches over to us. Okay, and this was just 5-10 minutes illustration I wanted to do with help of a specific industry. And I think I've come to the end of the presentation. And as I mentioned, I was targeting that few of us should be able to do a 2-minute elevator speech on what is supply chain management. Some of us would know now what their colleagues in the corporate world who belong to supply chain management, what kind of time pass they do in their offices. Or if you are young enough to decide on your career, probably this will be an eye-opener to decide a career in supply chain management. We can take some questions, Yogesh, Shashikant sir.
Yeah.
Vivek.
Yeah.
I'll be opening the session for the question answers, and just to share a thought. Vivek, very informative and a very good presentation, and I appreciate your command over the subject. And with this, I have one question to start with.
Sure.
Government is into public distribution system, and we don't see such kind of best practices followed by government. So do you see any further maybe opportunities where government can also be of such kind of having a such supply chain management, which can be of quite good help in this kind of pandemic situation as well?
Sure. So the as you rightly said, government is responsible in India for the public distribution system, and more often than not, the products that are involved are of commodity type, and they belong to the agricultural industry. Okay, and agriculture industry per se, they are by themselves fraught with lots of problems. Some of them that I mentioned about seasonality, unpredictable demand, and specifically the major issue with this industry, agricultural industry. I'm just talking. I'm not getting into the politics part. I'm just going to talk as an industry practitioner. This is they are heavy in the monsoons, and as you would know, the capability of prediction of monsoons it has been improving significantly, but historically they have been under a lot of stress of lack of enough information or lack of capabilities to come up with to predicting how much you are going to produce. So you would know that, okay, you have so many number of people living under the poverty line, and this is what they need to be fed, or this is what their weekly demands are, right? But on the production side, there always has been a big lacune on predicting how much a certain product is going to be produced. Okay, so that is the one big aspect why this thing cannot be professional enough. Okay, now I keep dealing with private companies who are in agricultural field, but the problems are still the same. They cannot figure out how much production is going to happen, and because of the dependence on the rainfall. The second thing is the production community, the farming community is not of a very scientific mindset. Okay, they follow very age-old techniques of determining what is to be produced. If you work at taluka level, village level, the farmers basically just gather, under the banyan tree or in front of Ram Mandir, and they just have a chat. Okay, what are you going to produce? So the same thing I'm going to produce this year. They do not put a lot of thought on or any kind of scientific methods on what should be produced, where is the demand moving, what kind of prediction of monsoon is going to be there, what kind of prediction for the pricing is going to be there. So these are some of the inherent difficulties which are common for private sector as well as government. Okay, so the production bit is quite complicated, so to say, because of these conservative practices of production. And then when we talk about when we talk about bringing professionalism in when coming to distribution and storage, there are certainly a lot of political issues that happen. If you talk about the same activities to be done by private parties, the collection of the harvest, storing of the harvest, and distribution of the harvest, when we allow these things to be done by the private parties, they do extremely good job. And also because uh, lots of cold storage requirements are there in these commodities. Lot of food grains are to be stored under certain conditions of humidity and temperature and hygiene, right? So cold storage as well as hygienic storage is a big issue when it comes to storage and distribution. And again, because of lack of funds and because of lack of intent, whenever government tries to get into the storage and distribution of the commodities, that is where it fails. And right now, we look at what are the good practices that are being followed by some of our counterparts coming from the US or from Japan. We see that they have very meticulous practices when it comes to collection, cleanliness, and storage under proper temperature and humidity conditions, so that the food does not go waste. So such kind of definitely there, not so much on production side, but definitely on storage and warehousing side and transportation side, I think there is big scope for improvement.
Yeah,
I
open to
think
questions.
Vivek, as you mentioned rightly regarding the agro industry, okay. But then, let's say very recently, I have seen, because I am involved into that sector as well. So since last few years, okay, government is supporting and helping the farmers, producer companies, okay, to like say build up the infrastructure. Okay, it could be for like say cold storage, or it could be logistic part, or anything related to trading. That is one. Okay, and like say if you of Ajinkyans, okay, 1991 batch Ajinkyan, Mr. Nitish Shende and his brother, they are working in Europe, okay, to help the farmers, okay, for the prediction of the monsoon, prediction of the, like say, what kind of crops they need to. So similarly, they have started in India. So I think, like say, government is trying to push in lot many things, okay, and the technology, even the new maybe it could be AI or it could be ML. They are introducing into the distribution and the logistics. So I think, like the government is so active nowadays, and but then, like maybe the entrepreneurs who are to get into business sector, they are willing to take the risk, Okay, like say opting for like say agro industry.
Yes, as I said, and yeah, I'm aware of the efforts by Nitin Shinde. I was in touch with him a few years ago before I started
Okay,
this company, etc. And I also understand the government's initiatives in pockets. And however, looking at the size of our problem, looking at the amount of people who are dependent on the public distribution system, uh, I think we have really a long way to go. And after
yeah,
having worked in corporates for uh, even with the big names, it's a continuous process, and it can't stop at one policy or one initiative. It's a continuous process of learning and doing better next year with every season,
right,
and to catch up to keep pace with technological advent in this is also going to be a challenge. And finally, it all matter when it comes to government. It all matters with the intent, uh, and it is
Economic
a bit
package.
different when it comes to corporates, right? We have very clear sight of where you want to go and where you want to spend your monies, etc. But with government, it's a question of intent as well as the availability of fund at that specific point of time. And I think we have been lagging for far many years to have I'm not trying to sound very pessimistic. Good that few steps are being taken, but because we have lost so many years, yeah, so
yeah,
we have really lot of ground to cover. That
right,
was where I was coming from.
right. Balaji Biradar has one question for
Vivek.
you. Yes, Balaji.
Uh, yeah, yes. So in the recent economic package, government I think has, according to my impression, tried to do significant bit. Like they have abolished this APMC system. They are changing the Essential Commodities Act. So aren't these significant game-changing steps?
I'm sure these are significantly game-changing steps, but my only contention is these steps need to be done year after year.
Right,
A matrix has to be built in determining whether that specific initiative has borne any fruit, and if it is done, do we have enough fund to continue that initiative. I have no issues or no contention that government is doing new steps, but these have to be repetitive. This has to be done season after season, government after government, and should not be based on one specific politician's goodwill or one bureaucrat's good measures that have been taken. Yes, I agree with you, Balaji. No worries there. These are game-changing initiatives, but these have to be done repetitively, measured, and re-implemented if there is any flaw.
Vivek, this is Sachin on the line. Well, initially at the outset, like I really highly appreciate the presentation that you have given to all of us. I have a quick question for you. Can you
Speaking
lay
a
some
little louder,
emphasis
can
on?
you speak?
Yeah, are you able to hear me now?
You're audible, but sometimes, I mean, few words a bit feeble. I don't know
Okay,
if it's
I'll
yeah,
try to
go
be a
on.
little louder as well. Okay. So can you,
Go
can
on.
you lay some emphasis on utilization of blockchain technology in the supply chain management and gamut?
Certainly.
Because my knowledge actually is, as far as the blockchain technology is, the Bitcoin, and then the US likely to adopt the digital currency. So once kind of US adopts the digital currency, then the whole. So that's only the extent that I have as far as when I'm trying to start reading about this blockchain technology. So it is interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit curious actually.
Yeah. So we, as a company and as a service provider, we also made a bit of research and we spoke to our customers. And this was in vogue, this was in fashion, and the kind of hype that it created in the initial days, probably a year, 1.5 year ago, is let's say it's not an increase, but it is kind of steadied down. And the kind of use cases, let me talk about the use cases and the utility where the blockchains could be used.
Mhm.
So for an instance where we have multimodal transport kind of situations,
Uh-huh.
multimodal kind of transportation, or the situations where we have very, very simple things like invoice submissions for some kind of service or some kind of material that has been delivered to the destination. To avoid any kind of duplicity, we found that blockchain would find a lot of utility. In
Got it.
case of multimodal transport, when we have material coming in over ships, then getting loaded onto railways, and from railway it is unloaded and then loaded into vehicles. How do we
Mhm.
keep a track of the completeness and the correctness of the material that has left from point A, and then it has gone through point B, C, D, E, F, and then it is kind of fragmented, and then it is split into different directions. How do
Right.
we make a continuous track of the entire the supply that has been made, and different recording of different events, damages that have happened,
Mhm.
robberies, thefts that have happened in the interim. So
Right.
those were the kind. One was dealing with the physical movement, the multimodal transport part, and the
Mhm.
second was more to do with commercials, to avoid any kind of duplicity. So these were two of the major. Just giving an example, right? These were some of
Right.
the use cases that our customers agreed with us. We went up with something like 20 different use cases where blockchain could be used to
Mhm.
enhance and digitize your supply chain. But when it came to the aspects, finally it said that, okay, I want to be sure that this was my material, and I want to sure that this is the money that I'm paying out. Okay,
Right.
so everything else fizzled out, and these two things, people said that yes, if we were to invest in blockchain kind of technology and we were to build our information layer on multiple server quasi server network, these are
Mhm.
the two things that we think that are going to make sense in our industry. I
Got it.
don't claim that I cover the whole universe of supply chain, but whatever people that I interact with, primarily the
Uh-huh.
corporates in FMCG, chemicals, tires, that kind of an pharmaceuticals industry, these are the
Mhm.
primary use cases that came into force. There could be others. There
Okay.
could be in marine transportation or air freight transportation where I
Mhm.
have not interacted so much. I would not be able to comment
Okay.
on that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, well,
team.
thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry, Yogesh here again.
Hey, Yogesh,
Just a minute.
can
Please,
I,
please.
Yogesh?
We are short of time. We can only take one more question. That's all. We are short of time. Please, one more last question.
Can I just, it's Ganesh here. Can I just add a quick comment rather than a question that would perhaps help the conversation? So Vivek, first of all, great job done. The one kind of point I would kind of like to add and allow people to think on a little bit is a lot of large companies, and particularly pharmaceutical companies is a great example, but other large companies where the end product, the finished product that is being sold and distributed has a high value, there is a big issue today in the world of counterfeiting. And a lot of companies, in order to protect their reputations, to protect their revenues, etc., are getting into a lot of anti-counterfeiting measures, and that in its own right is a great sub. So the thought was triggered by the previous person who asked the question about blockchain technology, and this is where when you kind of start to think smart, and each and every individual product is either barcoded or QR coded, which is more smarter than barcodes nowadays. And if you have a QR code on each product, and then from that, you put it in a package or a carton or whatever, and that's QR coded. And then again, many cartons are put on a pallet, and that's QR coded, and everything from each production plant to each final, say, country distribution center or regional distribution center, and each retailer